All right, folks, let's talk about the full moon lunar eclipse in the sign of Taurus on October the 28th. I've done 3 videos, as many of you know, to prepare for this eclipse video. One talking about the remaining transit energy in the sign of Virgo, the remaining transit energy in the sign of Libra, the remaining transit energy in the sign of Scorpio for the rest of this year. And some of the energy, for example, in the Libra video talks about energy going into next year and indeed 2025 because of the eclipses taking place in Aries and Libra. One quick error that I had made that I corrected earlier today is that when I uploaded the Libra video, the title still said Virgo, so that may have caused some confusion, but now everything is titled correctly. So there's a Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio video. The Scorpio video was also uploaded. So these talk through the different transits that are occurring, and those 3 videos both have a relationship with the content related to the eclipse in a couple of days' time. Or I'm recording this on October 26th, but I'm going to post it on October 27th, just so I'm not posting things so close together. And honestly, a lot of what I had to say about the eclipses is in those videos, particularly the Scorpio video. If you are strapped for time and don't have almost 3.5 hours to give all these videos, know that the Libra, Virgo, and the Scorpio video are there to accompany you for the rest of the year, because they're talking about transits that are occurring for the rest of the year, including those that have an impact on the eclipse on the 28th. So if I were to prioritize those 3 videos with regard to the eclipse, I would make this video, of course, the top priority for the full moon eclipse. Next, I would watch the Scorpio video, then the Virgo video, because one of the transits that is encapsulated in this eclipse is Venus in Virgo trining Uranus in Taurus. So the Virgo video will talk more about that. And even though, as far as the eclipse itself is concerned, there may not be kind of a direct, it's arguable how much Venus getting ready to oppose Neptune around November the 3rd is relevant or important to this eclipse, but that video talks about that too. And I'm gonna bring that up in this video one more time as a summary. And then after that, I would look at the Libra video. So this video, the Scorpio video, then the Virgo video, then the Libra video. Okay. The full moon occurs when the moon is opposite the sun. The disk of the moon is full. The sun is in Scorpio and the moon is in Taurus. 6 degrees away from the moon, roughly, is the planet Jupiter. Now, I tend to be very anal about my conjunctions and tend to only look at conjunctions if they are 5 degrees apart. There are a lot of astrologers who would look at this full moon as being conjunct Jupiter. I think that I need to break my rule at least a little, if not more than a little, and agree with them. 6.5, 7 degrees is close enough. Jupiter is retrograde, so is approaching the moon. Not that it matters, because the moon travels fast enough that she is going to conjunct Jupiter within hours of the full moon. And Jupiter, as most of you know, has been since May of this year and will continue to do so till May of next year, is ending a 12-13 year cycle, starting a 12-13 year cycle in the sign of Taurus, wherever Taurus sits in your chart, what house it occupies, what that house stands for. And Uranus is also in Taurus, making that part of the chart, making us more authentic in the Taurus part of our chart. And by part of the chart, I mean the house occupied by Taurus in our chart and what that house stands for. So the disk of the moon is close enough to Jupiter, the planet attempting to create an auspicious new beginning in the sign of Taurus. And they've also done a video on the Jupiter transit in Taurus. If you look at within the last 10 videos, you'll see that. So if you want to understand more about that, you can use that video as a reference. But as I have mentioned before, for those people who have Jupiter direct in your birth chart, this creation of a 12-13 year cycle and the ending will have greater resonance and greater yang action, greater external manifestation between May and September 4th of this year, and then after December 31st of this year until May of next year, when Jupiter is direct. Right now, Jupiter is retrograde. It went retrograde on September 4th, and it will be retrograde till December 31st. So those people who have Jupiter retrograde in their birth chart will likely manifest externally more, because their energy will be in sync with the Jupiter retrograde. So the ending of a 12-13 year cycle, starting a 12-13 year cycle in the sign of Taurus, is going to be more visible, more yang for those people who are within retrograde Jupiter. If you have Jupiter direct in your birth chart, as I've mentioned, for this time while Jupiter is retrograde, it's likely that you felt the push of this ascension that Jupiter is creating. Could be an ending. In fact, with Jupiter, it is more likely to be an ending that is creating the start, creating a new beginning, as opposed to this massive thing that a lot of contemporary Western astrologers sort of assign to Jupiter, as if you'll become a millionaire, or as if you're going to get that huge quantum leap of a promotion or something along those lines. So I just want you to be aware of that and careful of that. For those people who have Jupiter direct in your birth chart, as I've mentioned before, this time period with Jupiter retrograde is likely it's likely that you are being more behind the scenes and preparatory based on the initial push between May and September of this year, so that you can continue to push through with the new beginning being created in the Taurus part of the chart after December 31st of this year until May of next year. All right, well, there's that. Then, about 6 degrees away from the sun in the sign of Scorpio, we've got Mercury and Mars. Mercury and Mars conjunct to the exact degree the day after, on October 29th, the full moon lunar eclipse. This conjunction is directly related to the Mercury retrograde that we had between August 23rd and September 15th, earlier this year. Because the two transits that Mercury was about to make when it went retrograde were opposing Neptune, which Mercury finally did at the end of August, beginning of September. Excuse me, at the end of September, beginning of October, forgive me. And conjuncting Mars, which Mercury has not been able to, was almost getting ready to do when it went retrograde on August 23rd, and is finally going to be doing. The other thing that I have mentioned when we look at a lunar eclipse, we have to look at, in my experience, and I will throw myself on the sword for this, this really does resonate in my interpretive work, is that I would look back to the week before and after August the 28th to see what it is that occurred there. Again, there's this relationship with Mercury going retrograde on the 23rd with this particular eclipse. And it is possible that from an eclipse perspective, many of us, not all of us, many of us felt what this eclipse actually means during that time. When it comes to a full moon lunar eclipse, we often expect that what is going to happen, it's like a diminuendo in music. It's like we think that as we head closer to the full moon eclipse, everything is going to get really concentrated. So at the time of the eclipse is when we're going to see or feel the eclipse. What I see happening is that starting from the solar eclipse, which for us, the solar eclipse I'm talking about is the one on April the 19th, as we head towards the full moon lunar eclipse, it's a kind of a widening of energy. So by the time we get to the lunar eclipse on October the 28th, the changes are already, it's a much more diffuse energy. It's a much more diffuse energy. For some people, you may even look at that widening occurring from August 28th, the week before and week after. And it's the week before and after an eclipse that I think are important. And right now we are in eclipse season, so the eclipsiness and the intensification of eclipsiness would have started the week before October 14th when we had the solar eclipse in Libra, and will continue till about November 3rd or 4th or 5th, once we're done with the week after the eclipse on the 28th. With eclipses, we have talked about this before. It's a sense of God taking the wheel. It's a sense of change being created that we either have wished for or that Spirit decides is necessary for us. On our own, we are unlikely to be able to manifest and create this change. So eclipsy events occur that are big enough, dramatic enough to be thought of as not just the end of a chapter, but the end of a book, as I like to say in 18th century novels, where a novel like War and Peace could have, gosh, I don't know, 4 parts, and each part could have 3 or 4 books, and each book could have anywhere from 15 to 38 chapters or something like that. And this isn't really the end of a chapter as much as it is the end of a book, a whole section. And so whatever it is that eclipses bring, the other thing that eclipses bring, and why sometimes in ancient astrology people would say, well, restrict your activity, stay indoors, avoid this, avoid that. It's largely just to, anxiety does increase. There's just this inner awareness that cheese and things, etc., are being moved, and it's not entirely in our control. That the pieces on the board are being moved and the change is bigger and we don't have the answers. The other thing with eclipses is mortality, issues related to the veil is thinner between this world and the next. People can get information about their own mortality or somebody else's mortality. If someone is dealing with some sort of illness or situation that could compromise that, there could be an increase in people passing, people, situation, loved ones, things that are loved, just anything being eclipsed in and out of our lives. Either the eclipsing happens during an eclipse, or you get that intimation, you get that message, you get that communication around something along those lines. Finally, with eclipses, I feel like it is important to be internally cautious of one's own energy because things feel so turbulent and things feel so out of control and so confusing. But I think that it's important to show up for every opportunity that is coming up, and to show up for everything as long as it feels like it is in alignment and worth showing up for. And even otherwise, I think it's worth showing up for opportunities and things that you are asked to respond to, or you feel compelled to apply for, compelled to do. I think it's important to remain in action because, as I've said before during eclipses, knock on every door. You've heard me say this lots of times, because you will knock on many and they will not open for you, and the one that's meant for you will just fly open and it will pull you in. We've all had that experience. So, coming back to the full moon and the aspects. The moon is opposite the sun. The moon is in Taurus. The sun is in Scorpio. 6-7 degrees away from the moon, the full moon is a retrograde Jupiter in Taurus. 6-7 degrees away from the sun are Mercury and Mars. On the 28th, Mercury opposes Jupiter because Mercury is almost as far from the sun as Jupiter is from the moon, and Mars, after the full moon, Mars opposes Jupiter first, and then a few hours after the full moon, Mercury opposes Jupiter, and the day after, on the 29th, Mars and Mercury conjunct. So we have a full moon in Taurus, which is also a partial eclipse, conjunct Jupiter, opposed by Mercury and Mars. Mercury is separating from the sun. So in the Scorpio part of the chart, it is likely that a degree of communication is going to increase. I've done a whole video on the Scorpio transits. You can take a look at that after this if you're interested. But in the Scorpio part of the chart, as Mercury moves towards greater visibility and separation from the sun, as it is doing right now, and especially as you enter into November, and Mercury becomes more visible, till about November the 10th, it's likely that communicating, transacting, related to the Scorpio part of the chart is going to become more active. Some of this may be related to whatever downloads Mercury and received from the sun on October 20th when they were conjunct. Mercury is still within the Virgo Mercury cycle. If you want to know and understand more about that, I would refer you back to the Virgo video I just did a few days ago. And so the process of heading towards the middle of December and continuing to implement and execute in such a way that would benefit the Virgo part of the chart will gather momentum, but also communicating and transacting related to the Scorpio part of the chart will also gain momentum. Absolutely, you can look back to August 28th, the week before, week after, to see if there's any relationship between this communication and what was occurring then. If you have Mercury direct in your birth chart, as I've said before, it is possible that whatever started up or came to you around the week before and after August 28th may have felt a little bit like a false start, because by the time Mercury went direct, things could have reversed or changed course. Whatever may have come during that time was close enough to Mercury being retrograde that it's likely that after Mercury went direct, things looked different. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the overall direction related to whatever it is that came to you or started, or you started to, that it was altogether that the week before August the 28th is lost completely. You may still feel like, all right, on to phase 2 of that, or whatever that is, and you might start the process of communicating about it. Mars is losing visibility. He's already pretty much invisible, and is losing visibility because while the Mercury is separating from the Sun, Mars and the Sun are getting closer and closer together. When we get to the Scorpio new moon 2 weeks after the full moon eclipse on November the 12th, Mars and the Sun are going to be, Mars and that new moon are going to be very close together. Indeed, on November the 18th, the Sun will conjunct Mars. So while Mars is in Scorpio, and Mars has a reputation for, of course, us pursuing goals assertively, sometimes aggressively, in the part of the chart where it currently is, which would be the Scorpio part of the chart, and sometimes causing injury, breakage, conflict, competition, pursuit of goals and setting of boundaries, hunting, gathering, protecting. The male energy, archetypally, that we all have. Mars in Scorpio, you might find, Mars remains behind in Scorpio after the Sun moves into Sagittarius, but not for long. And by the time Mars is done transiting the sign of Scorpio, he's still invisible. He's still close enough. We're talking about the 18th of November when the Sun and Mars are together. So by the time the Sun enters Sagittarius and Mars is in Scorpio, it may be that it is by the time you get to the end of November. Give me 1 second. There's something I want to just find out here. It may be that as you get to the end of November, beginning of December, you feel like you have a greater sense of what action you want to take related to the sign of Scorpio. Why am I focusing so much on the Scorpio stuff? I'll explain that in a second. Just be patient with me for a second, because I want to let you know when, I'm going to take that back. I'm going to take that back because Mars enters Sagittarius on November the 24th. That's what I wanted to check. During its transit through Scorpio, Mars is likely to be more muted considering how close it is to the Sun. And as you head towards November the 18th, and even until the Sun is comfortably in Sagittarius and Mars is comfortably in Sagittarius, probably making it past the week of Thanksgiving, until then, you might find that while the communication aspect of things related to the sign of Scorpio remains strong till the middle of November, the action related to the sign of Scorpio, in terms of it really having a certain amount of drive, may be less impulsive, which is no bad thing. When I say to you that you kind of have, the real action in a particular part of the chart really starts once the new moon occurs there, you don't have to wait to take action till that new moon occurs in any part of the chart. So you don't have to, with Mars in Scorpio and Mercury in Scorpio and the Sun in Scorpio and this full moon occurring, opposing all these planets along with Jupiter and Taurus, you don't have to wait on anything. What will be interesting is that I think that circumstances will conspire in such a way that you might find that you are unable to take a certain type of action until after that new moon in Scorpio. And that new moon will occur. And so from the middle of November to the middle of December, you will be in action-oriented mode related to the sign of Scorpio based on all these transits that are occurring in Scorpio now. Mars entered Scorpio a week and a half, a couple of weeks ago. You know, the Sun and Mercury entered Scorpio recently. Mercury is going to gather momentum, gain greater visibility, and communication related to the sign of Scorpio for about 10 days in November is going to be much more present. Why? Could it have anything to do with this full moon in Taurus? Let's see. The video's still going. Mars's actions, when, as I've said, a planet conjuncts the sun, not only is some of its energy zapped because it is combust, it is not visible, it is not exercising its full pull on us here on Earth, but it is also downloading from the sun. The sun is the source within us. Seeing, knowing, all knowing, encouraging us, communicating with us, encouraging alignment. And so when it comes to Mars being so close with the sun as we head towards November the 18th, it may well be that as we move forward towards that time, whatever actions we do take are very, and we will, and especially after November the 12th, we will. They're likely to be more muted, a little bit delayed, more considered, and there may well be until the 18th, and even as we head into December, a certain amount of confusion and a feeling like we really may not know which way to go and how to completely execute with vigor and with Martian energy. That doesn't mean that there isn't going to be communication in this part of the chart soon. It doesn't mean that, you know, as we head towards October, it doesn't mean that some of this communication has already been underway. Whatever's going on in the part of sign of Scorpio, with the Sun and Mercury and Mars, and at some point in December, Venus, is part of a set of transits that we deal in this part of the chart every year. Whatever's going on in the sign of Taurus with this full moon eclipse has to be looked at again as a full moon in Taurus, but also as a lunar eclipse in Taurus. As a full moon in Taurus, something in the sign of Taurus gains energy, visibility. Visibility can mean that you find yourself in the eye of more people than normal in the part of the chart where Taurus sits. So if Taurus sits in your 11th house, it may be that through social media, for some reason, you are hanging out with friends, you're more visible to them, you're more visible to your network, your community, etc. If Taurus sits in the 5th house, it could be greater visibility time, you know, greater energy around lovers or children, and so on and so forth. If it's the 6th house or the 3rd house, it could be colleagues. If it's the 1st house and you have Taurus rising, beware. You could have visibility of your own, or you could be heading towards some sort of a temper tantrum meltdown related to feeling like your boundaries have been transgressed. When it comes to a full moon, I always say pay attention. If it is visibility, wonderful. If it is an offer, wonderful. If it is a culmination of certain things, wonderful. And you're happy about it, even more wonderful. If it is an intensification of energy, irritation, anger, full moony behavior, fluidic, tears, excessive bleeding, you know, these kinds of things tend to align with lunar cycles, especially when when the disk of the moon is full. Less sleep, more energy, more irritation. Even though traditionally between the new moon and the full moon we say energy is increasing, I find it's the days after the full moon, the week after the full moon, as I've mentioned to you before, that is best for execution because the energies are more balanced. As we're heading to the full moon, the cup is getting full, and we're likely to lean into intuitive and emotional irritation and impulsiveness much more easily. If you are on the receiving end of a tantrum, or you're the one who is throwing a tantrum, if you feel like it has to be expressed externally, or if you feel like you're suppressing something, pay attention to it, because it's likely to represent some sort of emotional or intuitive truth that is being represented. The other thing to understand is that this intensification energy in the Taurus part of the chart is linked to the Scorpio new moon 2 weeks from now. That's the corresponding new moon to this full moon. So as we head to this full moon in Taurus, what is coming up for us in the Taurus part of the chart that is going to be knocking on the scorpionic door in such a way that we might find ourselves in greater activity in the Scorpio part of the chart, informed by this Taurus new moon to take the appropriate activity. The full moon may require a certain amount of integration between the Scorpio and the Taurus part of the charts that are opposite each other. So what are these houses? How do they need to be integrated? How does, especially with this annual energy, with the Sun, Mercury, Mars, and Venus conglomerating in the Scorpio part of the chart, how does the Taurus part of your chart need to be taken into consideration? Oppositions like this, and by now I'm also going to include the Mercury and Mars opposing Jupiter, and some might say opposing this full moon. Oppositions are either face-offs, or else the opposition is asking for the bigger astrological event to be supported by the faster moving planets. In this case, in the case of the full moon is supporting and supporting and informing the Scorpio new moon on November the 12th. However, the Sun, Mercury, and Mars are supporting the eclipse in Taurus conjunct Jupiter. Also, this eclipse on the 28th, which is also a full moon, is the last of the Scorpio-Taurus eclipses that we've been dealing with energetically since September, October 2021. Not a bad time to reflect on whatever has happened in the Taurus part of our chart since then. What growth have we seen there? What have we determined or decided to release in the Scorpio part of our chart since then? And is that action plan on its way to be executed? You may not be certain about that, given how close Mars is to the Sun. You may not be certain about that, considering it may have been affected by Mercury retrograde and things not seeming like they were, or having some sort of a false start between the end of August and the middle of September. You may not be feeling like that because it's eclipse time and the doors are not completely open and there's not complete clarity. We just talked about the fact that Mars is going to be close to the Sun for much of November. So in terms of taking action, we may still feel like we're a little bit blind, like the gates are not completely open, even though the communication gates are going to be open as Mercury, as we head into November. Fascinating. And so when we look at the eclipse in Taurus, we can't completely ignore the Scorpio part of the chart, because the eclipse in Taurus is not only an eclipse as Taurus, but it's also supporting the Scorpio eclipses. So when it comes to these oppositions, we've got to ask the question as to how the Taurus and Scorpio part of the charts can act in alignment. But the alignment has to support the Taurus part of the chart, not only because we've got Jupiter and Uranus trying to create something beneficial and long-term and authentic in the Taurus part of the chart, but also the eclipses in the Taurus part of the chart, where the North Node eclipses and what we have needed to develop. And because this year is a handoff year in terms of eclipses, between the Taurus Scorpio eclipses and the Aries Libra eclipses, it's possible that the Aries eclipse that we had in April 19th and the Aries and the Libra eclipse we just had on October the 12th somehow continues. It's like a relay race, takes this baton and continues this development now in the Aries and Libra part of the chart, leaning into the Aries part of the chart, developing that, releasing something in the Libra part of the chart. Mars and Mercury coming into conjunction with the sun there, and from the sign of Scorpio, this I covered in the Scorpio part of the chart, supporting or trining both Saturn and Neptune and Pisces. It is eclipsy, it is decisive. And with Mars and Mercury coming together on the 29th, there are 3 transits that are relevant to this particular full moon eclipse. Venus trining Uranus. Venus in Virgo, trining Uranus in Taurus. Was there an opportunity or a set of opportunities that started up around the end of August that have been creating and contributing to a sense of authenticity and independence in the Taurus part of the chart? Is there something that comes up this week that supports this authenticity in the Taurus part of the chart? Is there financial gain or relationship or an opportunity that has come up in the past few days and may continue to come up in the next couple of days that supports this authenticity and independence in the Taurus part of the chart? All of that is possible. Remember that on November the 3rd, Venus opposes Neptune and Pisces, so you have got to protect whatever this opportunity or financial gain is, or whatever that is, from if the Neptunian energy concerns either the way you have been deluding yourself related to the Pisces part of the chart, or how someone else may be creating a loss and deluding you, or deceiving you, or gaslighting you, or stealing from you. You've got to protect whatever it is that is coming in that is trying to support the Taurus part of the chart as you head past November the 3rd. Between August, September, and October, it will have been very clear to you what it is that you need to protect yourself from the Neptune, from the Pisces part of your chart. So transit number 1 is Venus in Virgo, trining Uranus in Taurus. The Virgo video I did a few days ago will expand on that. Transit number 2 is Mercury and Mars conjuncting the day after this eclipse. Mercury separating from the Sun, Mars getting ready to conjunct the Sun on November the 18th, 19th. This is, I think, one of 2 things, or maybe both things together. The first thing that I feel very certain about is that it may be a committing to a decision, a resolve, to possibly move forward in a way that was experienced or inaugurated the week before and after August the 28th. And by the way, things being inaugurated don't just happen out of nowhere. The fact that I'm going after the week before and after August 28th is because something could have come through then in a much more concrete way. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have to go back to, the full moon in Scorpio in May, I think it was. Or doesn't mean that it just is coming out of nowhere. Doesn't mean that it isn't coming out of experiences for much of this year. It doesn't mean that it's not coming out of experiences that go back to November, December of last year, when there was this alignment there has been this alignment, this opportunity between the Virgo, Capricorn, and Taurus part of the chart that has been pulling us forward, requiring the transformation in the Capricorn part of the chart and growth in the Taurus part of the chart, supported by the Virgo part of the chart, and also supporting the Virgo part of the chart. So with all of that in play, it's likely or possible that as the Taurus part of the chart has been taking in energy, the Scorpio part of the chart, there's been greater clarity since that time about what needs to be released in the Scorpio part of the chart. And as Mercury and Mars conjunct after the Mercury retrograde earlier this year in August, September, it could be that there's clarity and resolve on your part related to the Scorpio part of the chart in such a way that it supports the Taurus part of the chart and is linked to whatever it is that may have shown up the week before and after August the 28th. Mars and Mercury are conjunct. Surgeries, injuries. Depending on where Scorpio sits in the chart and who is represented by it, whenever there's a Mars transit, you have to be careful of accidents and cuts and bleeding, sometimes surgeries. That could be productive, but communication around that. It's either the pursuit of goals, the defending of boundaries, or because we're talking about Mars, it could have a more accident-prone injury quality as well, related to the Scorpio part of your chart. And that talks to, the fact that the Scorpio part of the chart is going to support that eclipse means that there's going to be a certain amount of movement and action in the Scorpio part of the chart through December. Venus comes into the Scorpio part of the chart in December. That's when we're likely to see the solutions come through, and Mars is finally clearing the sun, and Venus is finally in Scorpio to say, here, I'm here. Here are the opportunities. Here are the blessings. But that doesn't mean that we should not remain in required action, whatever it is being required of us, so that as these transits get closer and closer together, we can reap the rewards. After November the 12th, however unenergized our Mars might be, however considerate it might be of what needs to be done, however paralyzed it might seem, however careful it might be in taking action, that doesn't mean that we should not be taking action. Because Venus is only going to be able to do what she's able to do based on what we have been able to do prior to that. The third transit that is encoded in this full moon, of course, is Mars opposing Jupiter. Mercury will have opposed Jupiter before. The question is, what do Mercury and Mars in the sign of Scorpio need to do and determine and decide in order to support that end of a 12-13 cycle, start of a 12-13 cycle, auspicious new beginning, ascension in the Taurus part of the chart? Jupiter will try and create the change. If you're already in alignment in the Taurus part of the chart, it will seek to elevate that alignment. And with Uranus, then make it more authentic and specific to you. If you're not in alignment, Jupiter will try to get you in alignment. And if you choose to not take that, you still get to have some sort of a new beginning in that part of the chart. So what communication, what action, because Mercury and Mars are together and so close to the sun, what decision or resolve has to be taken in the Scorpio part of the chart, resulting in appropriate action moving forward in the Scorpio part of the chart that can support this end of a 12-year cycle, start of a 12-year cycle in the Taurus part of your chart. And in doing so, this may not be entirely clear to you at this point in time. In doing so, creates the opportunity to take the crises in the Pisces part of your chart more seriously, and to finally deal with delusional losses, either because we have been delusional and have let go of our grip of reality in the Pisces part of the chart, or other parties have been involved in stealing something, our self-confidence, goods, finances, whatever, in the Pisces part of the chart. I had said that this Mars-Mercury conjunction, is one of two things. The first one I've already outlined. The second one is that it could be that you also at this time hear about some sort of, it could also be with the Mercury-Mars conjunction, especially as we look towards the Pisces part of the chart, it could be that you also, part of the resolve you take is also to figure out how you're going to deal with. It could be that you perceive, or that there is some sort of attack, considering Mars is involved, some sort of competition, some sort of assault on your boundaries in the Scorpio part of the chart that you are resolving to handle. But I don't think it's just that. I would say that the primary priority needs to be to support the Taurus part of the chart. Indeed, all of this, whatever's going on in the Scorpio part of the chart, there's the pursuit of goals, there's the decision-making, there's the resolve related to the week before and after August the 28th, supporting the Jupiter and Uranus activities in the Taurus part of your chart. But there could also be because each part of the chart stands for multiple things. There could also be an awareness of something in the Scorpio part of the chart getting weighted, more weight than is helpful to the Taurus part of your chart, in such a way that it threatens or seems to threaten. Remember that an opposition is a face-off. So it could be that a communication, Mars energy, the Sun energy in the Scorpio part of the chart starts to gather momentum in such a way that it says, hey, Taurus part of the chart, in the new beginning that you're trying to create and the authenticity, don't forget your responsibilities in the Scorpio part of the chart, and don't forget what needs to happen here, and don't forget, and in that way could throw down a bit of a gauntlet to say, not so fast with this new beginning, the Taurus part of the chart, deal with the Scorpio part of the chart also. And it could be that it is perceived as, or it could be a real threat to sabotage the new beginning in the Taurus part of the chart, or the greater authenticity. This is why I say that it is important for the Scorpio part of the chart and decisions that you make. This is my opinion. You do what feels right for you to support that Jupiter new beginning and the Uranian energy in the Taurus part of your chart, and align it with those North Node eclipses that change sign this year between Taurus and Aries. And it could be that it's two different things. Having plans and resolving how to make changes in the Scorpio part of the chart to support the Taurus part of the chart in alignment with August 28th, week before, week after, could be one set of energies. And right around now, you could be sensing communication that will become clearer in November. A lack of clarity with regard to how to be able to protect yourself and what action to take that may be related to competition in the Scorpio part of your chart, or some sort of boundary transgression that you also feel like you need to pay attention to and deal with, in such a way that that boundary transgression energetically splits your energy in such a way that you can't put all your energy in the Taurus part of your chart, or threatens, opposes the energy that is needed in the Taurus part of the chart to create that new beginning there and to make you more authentic there. It is a full moon. So the emotional, intuitive awareness of all of this, and it will not surprise me at all if most of us, all of us, have been feeling emotionally and energetically very full. So it is a full moon in Taurus, in the Taurus part of your chart. Visibility, irritation, intuitive knowing, a meltdown, whether it is suppressed or not suppressed, the completion of something. But it is also an eclipse in Taurus, related to eclipses that have been in play in both Taurus and Scorpio since September, October 2021. And the fact that, as I've also mentioned, the Taurus full moons seem to have some sort of important correlation with, historically, with the United States. Typically presidential elections, at least the last couple that I've observed, happen around the full moon. I think one of them on the full moon. That's looking back about 8 years with the whole sort of speaker thing. And anyway, we're going to leave politics out of this. Such an intense time, painful time globally. So there's also a call to make some decisions. And I think we're all being called on to see what actions need to be taken in the Scorpio part of the chart over the next couple of months that will support the Taurus part of our chart. Even if there's some sort of threat to the Taurus part of the chart, I think that we're going to be called upon to set the boundaries where they need to be. And finally, as a full moon, if not the eclipse, whatever has been growing and building in the Taurus part of our chart over the last week or so and over the next 24, 48 hours is going to feed and inform the Scorpio new moon. on November the 12th. And indeed, this is the funny thing we say about take action then, or action will increase then. You don't have to do anything. You can keep taking action now. What'll be funny is that there are certain actions that will be lined up, and you will realize that no matter what you did, you couldn't have gotten to them until after the 12th. That's what makes astrology fun, is realizing that even if you tried to do something at its XYZ time, it just would not happen until certain things aligned. Have a peaceful, thoughtful eclipse. And if there's one homework assignment I have for you, it would be that as you get to October 28th and 29th, what are you going to resolve to do and solve and elevate in the Scorpio part of the chart that will support the Taurus part of the chart? It may not be clear now, but it may be possible that it also helps you in the Pisces part of your chart. Action may be needed, but I actually think that this I agree with the ancients when it comes to the eclipses, that it's better to pull your own energies. I say show up for every single opportunity, but it's very important to pull your own energy in, so that in the confusing awareness that you do not have your hands on the steering wheel and some other force or forces do, you are still at least keeping your hands on your own internal steering wheel and paying attention and assessing what feels right to you and what feels in alignment to you. Whether ultimately it manifests in something or not is not completely in our hands, but there is something about the 28th and the 29th and the Mercury-Mars conjunction in Scorpio and how it might support the Taurus part of the chart, and how you may need to put some boundaries around any competition, any threat in the Scorpio part of the chart, or any overpiling that part of the chart so that it sabotages the Taurus part, how you're going to deal with that as well. So I would use the next 72 hours to get real with ourselves and assess what needs to happen in the Scorpio part of the chart to support the Taurus part of the chart. And if in the meantime something comes through, I'm still doing this video more than 24 hours before the full moon. I always say 72 hours before the full moon and about 24 odd hours after the full moon. You never know. It's happening on Friday. You may, given the fact that it's a weekend, may even give it till Monday to see what is showing up in the Taurus part of your chart. Although by that time, the moon is going to be in Gemini. If something comes through that makes you go, full moon in Taurus, let it in, acknowledge it. But also pay attention to where your cup is getting full and where you're getting antsy and what your inner knowing about what needs to happen in the Taurus part of the chart. I'm going to stop now. If you found this video useful, feel free to share it, tell your friends about it, blah, blah, blah. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Click the bell icon next to subscribe and the wiggly bell on top so that you're notified when I do new videos. Feel free to like and comment on the videos if you feel so inclined. It gives the video greater circulation on YouTube. And I thank you for your support. And until the next video, thanks. And feel free to check out the recent 2 or 3 videos in your own time, because they will give you important information that takes you to the end of this year. Thanks.